Everybody, I'm Candid Stanisci of NLL Lacrosse Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now, joining me as usual, our co-host Gary Groob. We have a special guest today, the Commissioner of the National Lacrosse League, Brett Frood. Brett, welcome to the program. Gary, of course, is always welcome to the program.
Thanks, guys. Pleasure to be here.
The pleasure is all ours, and we always like to start with what brought you to lacrosse, not necessarily as the commissioner, but just lacrosse. Period.
Yeah, I mean, it's my dad played in his college years, so I've got pictures of myself holding the old wooden stick when I was about 3 or 4 years old. So it's certainly been part of our family and growing up, you know, up in upstate New York for quite some time. So I've been fond of the sport. I was fortunate enough, obviously, to play in high school and make my way to college, and my brother as well, and continued to play after college and some adult leagues, and then really got into coaching, which has been my passion over the last decade, and over a decade or so. So this is a truly one of those intersections in life where passion meets professional pursuits, in a very material way.
You talk about your roots of the game. Much like many other people, whether it's family, friends, or just walking by a lacrosse court or field or arena, taking part in there. Let's talk a little bit about your business background. And you come from the sport of racing. Tell us what that experience was like and how much you enjoyed those 2 decades.
Yeah, what you may not know is I was in the finance, equity, capital markets niche before then, and realized, while I was enjoying life and spending time with friends in New York, and working hard, it just really wasn't a passion point for me, and wanted to get into the sports paradigm. So when I transitioned to racing, it wasn't necessarily the racing that was so attractive. It was just getting back into the industry of sports and competing. And for me, well, certainly not in the race car on a week to week basis, just being able to lead a team that was, week in, week out, 36 weekends competing at the highest level in a sport was really exciting. And then, donning different hats during the course of the week, from operations to the finance piece to the competitive piece, was obviously extremely challenging, and no day was monotonous. So enjoyed that piece of it. But ultimately, I'd say the big learning experience was just how to cultivate partners, because that's really the lifeblood of the racing world. Well, the only way you're competing on the weekend is if you have strong partnerships, and that whole ecosystem has changed over the last 2 decades. And has gone from, we'll call it the dashers and the billboard kind of mentality, to just holistic, authentic partnerships driven on content, and really tying brands to our fans and all of our constituents. So those are certainly some of the parallels and things I hope to transition over to this league, and find those authentic, not only endemic but non-endemic partnerships that can live into perpetuity and have a meaningfulness to them that is hopefully different than some that we've seen in the past.
Yeah, you've got, with Stuart Haas, the racing team that you were president of,
Yes, sir.
it had consistency and a high competitive, a compete level, very high compete level. How important was that, looking back, moving forward?
Yeah, it's vital, right? You think about human capital, and it doesn't matter what we're talking about. The people that you surround yourself with, are ultimately what's going to generate the most success. And anyone that thinks differently is probably not going to be that successful. And for us, it was creating a culture, not only a winning culture, but a culture that was driven on teamwork, competitiveness, and just an overall daily unified goal, which was winning. And I say winning, that's on and off, because we go back to the partnership. And everyone here, while they were certainly busting their chops to compete at the highest level and win championships, they knew we had to deliver for our partners as well. So it's just as I transition to this new position, there's obviously a pretty strong culture, I'd say, amongst the league itself, and certainly as I get to know and have gotten to know internally. But there's always room for improvement, right? And it's finding those people that want to dig every day and have the same common goal. And there's no pride of authorship, but we've definitely got to continue to cultivate a distinct DNA that fans and media and potential new fans and everyone in between recognize that's what that league is all about. And I'm excited to continue to foster that and grow up upon the pillars that have already been set.
Let's hand it over. Teamwork here too. Over to Gary, the heart of this conversation.
Well, I was thinking, because originally when I thought, racing and lacrosse, really they work hand in hand, because it's the same kind of ideal of working with partners and building it from the ground up. And I guess you really had a great thing from building Stuart Haas back in 2008 to where it is now, to jumping into the National Lacrosse League, where your predecessor was able to stabilize and build. Now, what is your vision to take it to the next level?
Yeah, so I'll say I've been asked the question, what's your 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10-year, 20-year plan? And we'll get there. But what am I think I started beginning of September, so we're closing in on 90 days. So it's honestly been a huge learning experience, and I wasn't naive to how challenging that process would be, right? Just because I'm a lacrosse guy, it doesn't mean I know the NLL or how to take it to the next level. I hope I have skill sets that will work in unison with our existing human capital to get us to where we need to be. But it's going to be a big learning and evolution process for me. So it's getting to know the product, the processes, the governance, the partnerships, and using that word again, the DNA of the league. Been spending a lot of time fostering what I hope is meaningful relationships with all the different constituents, and on a million Zoom meetings, and getting into the weeds on what the league is all about. So I can certainly tell you what my short-term focus areas are. But if I were to encapsulate it all, at the end of the day, it's really about creating enterprise value for our league and our owners and our players. So I think of all of it is these kind of key pillars, and that will certainly trickle down to the fans, who will be able to hopefully appreciate and consume this great product for years to come, and consume it in new and improved ways, from a technology, from a linear, from a digital standpoint. And when I think about long-term goals, we look at a lot of the great leagues in this world, whether we're talking football to soccer to many in between. There's a process to get where they are now, and we want to be considered one of the most respected leagues from a global standpoint, and have an exponential number of fans versus where we are today.
Right. Will you be as aggressive in marketing this league as you were with Stuart Haas?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm super excited, when I think about it, walking into the racing world, we had 70 million fans in, North America, right? So I was, building a team with already what was considered, one of the largest fan bases in the world relative to sports. This obviously has a strong avid fan base, but when you think about volume, it's got so much room for more potential. And that's what really gets me excited relative to waking up and attacking the day is knowing that we have certainly this avid core, but we have millions and millions of more that can be consuming this product, and it's our job to introduce it. And I feel comfortable that if we do that properly, and you guys have seen it, you guys have been in the trenches. Like there are not many sports, if any at all, that are as good as what we have and what we're going to witness this weekend.
Absolutely.
From the athletes themselves to the action, the lack of monotony. I mean, they're going at it. It's physical, it's fast, it's intense. The entertainment value that all these venues have is phenomenal, right? They're going for an event. And you may or may not be a lacrosse fan when you walk in there, but the chances are extremely high. Then when you walk out, you're going to want to go again. And if you can't go again, you're going to want to consume it. You're going to be on the TSN or the ESPN apps or linear and consuming our product on a weekly basis. That's certainly the goal.
What are some of the best practices that you know now, hope to learn in the near future and in the long term, that you see will help the NLL grow?
Yeah, there's many, but I'd say ultimately we need everybody, all these constituents to help amplify. And that starts with the league, certainly figuring out a strong strategic plan that's consistent and focused relative to reaching out to these fans on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. But then we're going to look to our influencers. So those are the athletes ourselves, the teams. And then what I have found to be extremely successful in my previous job and jobs is finding strong partners that are really looking at our league because it's meaningful to them. Our fans resonate, our players resonate with them, the league itself, and it isn't just a billboard. So from a KPI perspective, they're looking to completely integrate with our product and our players, and create content and activate in a meaningful way that at the end of the day amplifies and brings our sport to a whole new paradigm of individuals that can be watching it. So that's going to be huge, is finding the right partners and cultivating those over time.
Now, I found a couple of things, excuse me, since you've come along. First of all, the draft, which was top-notch, first class over at the Carlu. For the first time that I saw a television production that was just, equal to an NHL or an NBA kind of draft. Right away, I've seen us take a step up with you at the helm, and that was only 2 weeks into your tenure. Did you get a chance to make it to any of the exhibition games? Because for the first time, instead of having it in just one venue, we had it in 7 all over the country, all over North America, really.
Yeah. So let me touch on the first. I'll take absolutely zero credit for the draft and the broadcast piece of that. I was thrown to the wolves, thrown on stage that first week on the job. But, the reality is we're producing, from a league perspective, 135 games plus the playoffs. We've got the TSN and ESPN coverage of every single live game we have this year, and have just a ton of confidence in our existing human capital, both internally and then all of our partners on a broader sense. And I think the draft exemplified that, right? We certainly need to improve on the live event piece of it, but from a broadcast perspective, it was excellent, and feel really good with all the components of that, and excited about taking each of those aspects of the broadcast to the next level as we look at this season, and in-game integration of different things, and just continually evolving and figuring out how we can have the best product possible for our fans. And relative to your next question, just exhibition season, yeah, it's been awesome, right? And that's part of the plan is the introduction of the sport, hopefully to new consumers in different places. But as you've seen, we've taken it to to our roots and have
Mhm.
spent time on the forefront of the indigenous side, and those exhibition games have been great, competitive. I think definitely setting us up for what will be a phenomenal opening weekend.
I thought,
Well, you were
sorry.
talking. Well, okay, hang on, Gary. I just don't want to go too far past the All Star game. Sorry, not the All Star game, but the draft. It
Yeah.
speaks to what you talked about partners, the partners that were there. While you're not taking credit for what happened, what you can do is salute the partners you have within the league who help put that together and how their thinking has changed where it comes to I guess is if this is a phrase that's inappropriate, please tell me, but production value, raising it.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. I mean, that's what you hope to do every day, across every vertical we have, and I'll use production in a broader sense, right? Because not just broadcasts is we want to elevate every bit of touch point we have, and interface we have with our fans, our players, and our media. And obviously spent time with you guys in Toronto, and are appreciative of. We talk about amplification. It's spending time even today, right? You guys are at the forefront of reaching out to our consumers, our big pulpits of our game, and we need to continue to elevate production in every sense of that word.
Now, one of the things is that by putting it to Onondaga for some of your exhibition games, the story inside the story of having Georgia there and having the Thompson brothers there,
Yeah.
15 minutes where they grew up. So I thought that was an ingenious idea just for that alone to help bridge the gap of Indigenous, because we talked about that in our last interview.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that family is has been so significant to our game and will continue to be. And not only from the indigenous roots and the spiritual side, and how involved they are in the community, and certainly spreading the love of the game and the roots of the game, but they're also individuals that have revolutionized the creativity of lacrosse, and you've seen it both on the field and certainly the box side. And for me, it's especially poignant because I grew up not far from Onondaga, and Lafayette was in my league, high school league. So I grew up playing Lafayette, which is certainly where the Thompson brothers, I believe, played their first couple of years. I think, if I remember, Lyle then maybe played for Salmon River or another team his senior year. But I spent a lot of time certainly playing that team, and I think really special having that game there, and obviously some of the other venues we had in Canada as well.
Every other sport is talking about Indigenous peoples, bringing them in at the beginning of a game, a national anthem, but it's all about recognition, introduction. Whereas with lacrosse, uh, it's part of the home of the indigenous people. The game itself, not just where it's played, but the game itself is an indigenous game. So it feeds naturally to this trend of appreciation for indigenous peoples, and it's something you've already been a part of since you knew about it since you were a young boy. I'm not trying to state how old you are or I am, but we know
Yeah.
that this game goes back to indigenous people for a very long time. It's a part of lacrosse, which to me is something I don't want people to forget. This isn't just when we see the behavior and the appreciation by the National Lacrosse League and lacrosse in general of Indigenous people, it isn't just an appreciation of Indigenous people on the outside, it's about the Indigenous people inside.
Yeah, no, for sure it's special, and I find it to be a fiduciary duty of our league to tell that story, and the appreciation of it. And I'll be candid. We talked about it. I grew up near it. Certainly have grown with an appreciation and a fondness, but I've got plenty of learning to do myself. It's easy to say, we're close to our indigenous roots, and talk about the impact they've had on lacrosse, but there's so much more than that. And that's where I think folks like Lyle and his family and some of his philanthropic initiatives and involvement in the community and telling that story are so vital. And I look forward to being part of that on the education side and learning, because I by no means are an expert on it. And it's certainly something I really look forward to learning more about, and hopefully our league can be at the forefront of telling that story in an impactful way.
Now, we talked at the draft about your idea of stabilizing all the teams before we look into more expansion into the league. But something that just jumped up to me when I was covering all of the preseason was having these camps that had 35, 40 players, which 30 to 35 of them were NLL caliber. So there's going to be a whole lot of guys after cuts, or just now after cuts, that are looking for homes and don't have one. Would it be remiss of me to think that maybe we're going to expedite and look into expanding sooner rather than later?
No, I don't think my stance has changed. You bring up a great point, though, right? It's the everlasting elasticity of supply and demand, and we obviously have a widespread volume of supply, like just world class players that aren't going to step on the field, and that's what makes our league so special, right? Because game in, game out, we've got the very best lacrosse players in the world are playing. So I believe there is the ability certainly to expand, because there's a number of players that can fill those spots. But I'd say we got to take that slow, because for me it is genuinely important to make sure that we are extremely strong and providing the enterprise value to the 15 owners, teams, and those folks that have invested so heavily in the league so far. And I think it'd be premature to say that we have the perfect business model that is putting out positive EBITDA on a positive basis, and that we have all the ducks in order to move forward and start, going after a bunch of new markets. That being said, I have found in my first couple of months that there's numerous inbound opportunities, and folks that are clamoring to have a team, which is great. But I feel it's really important, at least in these initial stages, for me to focus on our existing franchises, get it right, and then it'll make it that much easier to bring in new folks and on board and find really excellent opportunities for the league to get into even more iconic and hopefully fruitful markets.
Right. With your release of the playoff schedule and the dates, it'd be interesting in Memorial Day when everything comes together with NCAA and NLL, and it's going to be a busy weekend for lacrosse fans for sure. One of the things again that pops out to me again, because the West doesn't have as many teams, is with the crossover the East, it's a slight advantage to the East. So I would assume that we're looking more to the West when we do move forward with expansion.
I think in a utopia, maybe that happens, right? And we create that balance of, let's just say the next expansion team will obviously put us at 16. So in an ideal world, we've got 8 and 8. But that being said, I don't think that would be priority number one. It's really finding the right owners that are going to be passionate about the sport, that can amplify it, the right markets where we can fill buildings and have, set 18,000 people watching games and a really passionate fan base. And if we can kind of check those boxes, then we go down the line. I think probably having the next team in the West to create that balance and equilibrium would be ideal, but I wouldn't prioritize it number one.
Right.
I think you answered that question about in a way earlier when you were talking about making sure all the franchises are all in good shape and strong, and that would go toward an expansion team as well. So a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So
Yeah,
at the end of the day, I see what you're saying. When it comes to as far as building the league now, if expansion isn't the way the league necessarily has to be built at this point, what other ways can you, as you were pointing out, basically filling in the gaps, if you will, getting interest outside of the centers that have it, expanding interest? What do you see as one of the major tools for expanding interest?
it's so we talked a little bit about just finding the right partners that can amplify. It's continuing to work with our existing partners at TSN and ESPN with shoulder programming and editorial, and really supporting what they're already doing. It's building a very strong and wide casting strategy from a promotion and we'll call it marketing standpoint from the league, so we can reach out to new fans. It's looking at new technologies. It's eventually getting into fantasy sports and gambling and things that will bring in a whole different fan base. And you start putting all these things into the melting pot, and that's where you start making really substantial and significant gains in fanship, and that will lead to, obviously, I'd say, more pronounced media deals, bigger partnerships, and it's all self-fulfilling.
Yeah, and more interest in ownership and more interest in locations too.
It is, yeah. I mean, ultimately, for any of us on this call or that are listening that are entrepreneurs or have run businesses, right? We're looking for a sound business model that can be sustainable into perpetuity. And for those of us that are capitalists, which I am, you tend to want to do things that aren't necessarily just a hobby, but make money, and at the same time produce a phenomenal product. So that's the goal for the league is to take what we have, which is top-notch product, great athletes, and showcase it on a global scale. And if we're able to do that properly and put the right processes and governance in place, we already have heavily invested owners that are very sophisticated in their previous business pursuits. We're going to make their investment in this league hopefully pay off for them and provide an opening for expansion down the road and new owners.
So clearly the economic streams that exist within the sports world will be explored by the NLL now or in the near future, and then maybe find some new streams that may add to the pot and or the lacrosse building, if you will.
Absolutely. No doubt about it.
Now, when Nick Sakewis was on with us about a year and a half ago, he was talking about layers, whereas originally it was owners would open up their doors, throw down a carpet, and pray. And as we went along, we did layers of fanatics to sell merch and other revenue streams so that owners could make it a viable go, especially blue chip owners who are looking for the almighty dollar, obviously. Are we looking at more layers put on to help the ownerships?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about revenue stream, though, there's the two large ones in, I'd say, the sports universe. It's the commercial, we'll call it commercial partnership vertical, and then there is the media distribution vertical. So those are always going to be the two. And those are going to be generally driven by fans and the number of fans that we're able to garner, but also the avidness of the fan and how willing they are to engage with our product. And those will have the potential to drive those to extremely significant, peaks. Amongst all that is where you have this peripheral revenue opportunities. You brought up fanatics, so you're kind of hitting on the licensing vertical. And with that, I bucket in, we talk about new technology and what that can do. So we briefly talked about fantasy sports and gambling opportunities. And I think those are certainly revenue opportunities, but I see them less about the monetization in totality, more about the opportunity to grab fans, which then will feed those two larger verticals I just alluded to, which is the commercialization and partnership side of it, and then the TV, not necessarily TV, we'll just call it media distribution.
Right.
So yes, there are layers, but honestly, the goal of many of those layers is just really fanship and introducing people to our product, and then coming up with strategies to keep them and grow.
Yeah, when you talk about the media and that kind of the fanship or whatever, you're talking about establishing for the media companies a pool of people large enough to support the idea that they're willing to broadcast, and that's part of the reason why I agree with you that maybe expansion might be a little too early, because you need to grow the game in as far as how it's viewed and how it's watched, to ensure that the partners that you're in with now, like TSN and ESPN, that they're successful. You have to work on their success to keep them around, and to also grow the opportunity of advertising those streams and strengthen the ones that we were talking about, that you talked about, that the two that are the regular ones.
Yeah, spot on. It's not the proverbial chicken and egg here. I
No.
think it's pretty clear that you got to build, got to build from the bottom up, and um, much like any structures, you can't skip too much process, right? Or you put yourself in a challenging and potentially compromising situation. So, yeah, we want to make sure we're blocking and tackling from a traditional standpoint, and then we can attack some of the big picture things.
Now, one of the things that went away, I guess, after the 2011 season was the All-Star game. With TSN and ESPN, a prime thing I think to show off the game would be to reinstate the All-Star game. Is there any plans? I know there's logistical problems with trying to get everybody in and trying to get a weekend where no teams are going. But do you think in the future that there's a chance to get that back in?
Yeah, we have spoken about it. It's while we will not be attacking it in 22-23 season, it's certainly at the forefront of our minds. And I'd say, excuse me, it's when I think about the All-Star game, I'll just put it into the context of tentpole event, right? Um, whether it's the draft, whether it's an all-star game, or other unique things that we're doing within the league, where we're actually going to have a pretty large announcement next week about a tentpole event. It's about finding creative ways to reward the fans, reward the players, and create new and exciting content that hopefully is broader than where we are in an existing standpoint. So, yeah, long-winded answer to that is all-star games are great. We've seen them in every sport across the globe. There's the NLL has had success with that before, and certainly on our radar as we look toward the future.
The All-Star game, the old version, the All-Star game was about the All-Star players. The new All-Star that all the leagues are looking at is the All-Star game itself, and how the game is the All-Star. It's almost as if people are getting down to the roots of what's going on. And I suppose from what I'm hearing from you, that's essentially the direction the NLL is going, where you want to improve the appreciation of the game and the opportunity for players to show their special skills that maybe we don't get a chance to see in an all-star game, because unfortunately a lot of times all-star games aren't games they really play, even at the level that they're accustomed to. There's a trap there when it comes to all-star games, because players play for teams. Players have careers, and an all-star game may not be the venue that it used to be for people like me who've been around forever. Young people look at it differently than we do today or yesterday.
Yeah, you're on, and you're on with that. And I'd say probably a microcosm of that is you look at the Major League Baseball home run derby.
Mm-hmm.
It's just how that's evolved, right? It turns into an event and it's a content play, and they're creating shoulder programming and digital content around it, and all of a sudden you've got 60,000 people packing the place for watching a couple guys hit some dingers, right? So it's the same thing here. Is for me an all-star game is it becomes how you figure out how we harness the skill sets of these great players across the league and do it in a really creative way. I couldn't even tell you what that means right now.
Well, it's an
But
ever-changing appetite that the
it is.
fans drive.
It is. It is, and how they're going to consume it is ever changing, right? So, when Gary brought up the All Star game, you're right. I would say All Star event would be a better way to look at it, because I'm not even sure what that looks like. But what I do know is it becomes tentpole like that. That's what we need to do, and you want to drive awareness and do something that the fans can engage with in a unique way that potentially has never happened before. And I think it was I don't remember the year, but probably back in the late 90s. I remember watching the NHL All-Star game where Fox did the puck. It was probably about 92, 92, 93. And I remember where I was for that game and watching that fluorescent thing flying around, right? I'm not saying that's what we need to do relative to our game, but it is interesting because I remember that. I remember that day.
You're hitting where I want to go, and what I believe is the key to success when it comes to an all-star game. It also has to be appealing to people who don't know the game. Like, I think really it's crucial, the all-star game or the all-star weekend, whatever. What's crucial is to do stuff outside the box, no pun intended, that people who don't normally watch lacrosse gravitate to it, so that 30 or 40 years later, they say, in 2023, I was watching this lacrosse thing and I remember. And I guess what you got to work on is looking at and looking for what will be memorable and something that will stick in people's minds and help attach them to the game itself, to introduce them.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's what we used to consider traditional is changing by the day. So
change is traditional now.
It does. So we've got to have a progressive mindset relative to how we're engaging with the old, the current, and the new.
Well, watching the PLL put that together, though, over the last couple of seasons, I really think that they've hit on something, because the game's actually secondary. The skills, we talked about the home run derby, but the skills, and especially lacrosse skills, is I think the real grabber. And I think that's what would grab a whole new audience, especially if you were to market that beforehand. I just picture that would just be the people watching television going, what? That would be the hook to get them in. Yeah. And then the game would just, that's the cherry on the sundae.
Yep, for sure. They've done a good job. They've definitely done a good job from a marketing and amplification and bringing the athletes to the forefront, for sure.
And their enthusiasm, because if they're doing something, nothing says lacrosse more than competitiveness. If you're telling one lacrosse player, can you do this better than the other guy? I mean, and that enthusiasm and energy does lend itself to broadcast television. It does transcend the screen. I know a lot of times we talk about live is better and all that kind of stuff, but TV has its purpose and its use.
Yeah, definitively.
Yeah. To go on with that, I was thinking that this is probably the only sport where we can say we have the greatest players in the world all in one league, because hockey it's spread out through KHL, NHL, football is CFL, NFL, but here you have the best of the best at every single game. And again, to put that all together in one ploy as an all-star game, all-star weekend, all-star event, I think would really just it would just jump off the screen.
Yeah, whether it's all-star events or anything in between, any opportunity we have to showcase our games and or our players is definitely a goal of ours, because it is great, and not enough people have had access to it or are consuming it, and that's just kind of circling back, going full circle to the beginning of our conversation, why I'm so excited about not only this position that I've been so fortunate to be afforded, but the opportunity to tackle that with all of our teams and players and media partners it's extremely appetizing, and a ton of potential there.
Now, the Arena Lacrosse League, the NLL has had an affiliation with them for a number of years now, up here in Ontario, and now also with the West Coast in Langley, which is a great place for players to learn how to become professionals, with the guys coming down and the guys going up. With the PBLA starting out now in the U.S., will you guys look to work with them in the same regards as what you've done with Paul St. John and the Arena Lacrosse League?
Yeah, I think it's a work in progress to understanding all those potential opportunities and where it fits into the ecosystem. I'd say just on the surface, you brought up all the number of players you've seen on the exhibition season. It's important that we continue to nurture progress and find opportunities for players to continue to hone their skills and ideally end up in the big leagues, so to speak, when the time comes. So yeah, we're exploring. Obviously, you mentioned the legacy relationship with the Arena League, and then we've got newcomers, right? And I'd say we're not there yet, completely understanding what that looks like, and how we may be involved, or how our practice players or that potential pipeline fits in. But we've got our finger on the pulse of it, and it's important we continue to grow and foster the grassroots side of it.
Not only the finger on the pulse, you have the feet on the floor as a youth coach. So you have a good indication of what it takes. Tell us a little bit about that and how that contributes to your perspective as the National Lacrosse League commissioner. And we're here with Brett Frood, to remind people, the commissioner of the NLL.
Yeah, it's I mentioned to you guys up at the draft, it was interesting being in the greater Ontario area for a week and really getting a feel for, I'd say, how ingrained box lacrosse is in the fiber of sports culture there. And I unfortunately have not been able to witness that, at least on my domestic roots here, not only in Charlotte, but just generally in the U.S. And obviously field is at the forefront of the lacrosse side of it. So yeah, I've coached for a number of years and have two kids in high school that have played field their entire lives, and are ideally going to continue those pursuits as they move on to college and beyond. But what I have learned in my, I'd say, my short several months here is that we, the league, hopefully need to be at the forefront of building more box avenues and initiatives from a grassroots level, specifically here in the U.S. And I know it'll be, I won't say an impossibility, but large challenge to replicate what I saw in Ontario. But if we can just get a percentage of that passion and pipeline, the sport will be in a better place for sure. And I'm excited. I'm excited to even do that, obviously, just from a local standpoint. And I've even talked with I've had all my 16-year-old kids I've been coaching for the last decade asking when we're going to a box tournament. And I said, well, before we go to a box tournament, we should get you into a box and maybe teach you some box principles. So I don't know if we're ready to jump into a tournament. But you guys get the point. So
Yeah, no,
there's
yes.
a lot of work to do. And I'll say just being in the trenches here, there's very little in way of those initiatives. And a lot of it is venues, right? Like in Canada, you guys have the luxury of having a hockey rink every X number of kilometers, and the ability to convert during the summer, et cetera. And we're not in that position here. So I'd say, you kind of look at the things we got to tackle. That's one of them. Space and actually having the ability to play box somewhere. Once we figure that out, then I think it becomes easier to transition some of the field learnings and initiatives and become a little more involved from a youth standpoint, and then work our way up to the college side.
Yeah, we talked about this briefly. I was talking about going through the tunnel from Virginia and going through to North Carolina and such, and how the weather changes. That's the additional challenge that you have. The need to drive people inside, if you will, is a lot less where you are and south of where you are, where being outside is a natural state. For us, a natural state for us is to be driven inside in the winter. So that's a challenge for you in that regard, I think, as far as venues are concerned, because the need, quite frankly, is a lot less.
Yeah, no, it's for sure. But I mean, that's not just our sport, right? And just in
Right.
general, finding venues and space is a challenge, especially when you look to just the massive amounts of competition on youth sports side,
Yep.
grappling for space and bodies.
Yeah.
Now,
Here we have indoor soccer, indoor football, indoor, lots of different
Yeah.
indoor events, right?
Mhm.
So go ahead, Gary.
no,
I just
just we
wanted
only
to
have a couple of minutes left, so just heading into opening weekend, I just was curious if there's anything in particular that we have to look forward to other than the games themselves.
Well, we have a lot to look forward to,
We've been
because
counting it
we've
down.
got a number of games starting in about 48 hours. So some phenomenal matchups to open the season, spanning the country, or our two countries, I should say. So I'm pumped. I'd say it's rare to have to wait 3 months before, just from a leadership position, to wait to actually consume the product firsthand. Well, I've been to games before, but I'm extremely excited to get on the road and spend time with the teams and the fans this weekend. And hopefully we've got some high scoring, intense, physical games that set the momentum for the year.
I'm sure we will. Will you be attending any particular games, or just one? Or
Yeah, I'll be attending 3. So we'll be heading to Halifax, and then Toronto, and then catching the late game. We got a 2-hour difference between Toronto and Buffalo. So Halifax to Toronto to Buffalo.
well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time with us. I know you're very busy, and especially with opening weekend happening. It's a pleasure talking to you. I wish you nothing but success with all the endeavors in bringing this to the next level.
Thanks, guys, and likewise appreciate the support you provide to not only the global lacrosse community, but obviously more specifically our league and teams. And when we talk about the amplification and the constituents, you guys certainly fall into the important constituents. Certainly fall into that vertical. Happy to be on, and look forward to the season, and thank you for everything you guys do as well.
Well, I really appreciate your work and what you're doing, and of course the National Lacrosse League and how it fits into the world of lacrosse. It's a real pleasure for you to take the time to spend with us. We appreciate it.
Yep. Anytime, guys. We'll talk soon.
Okay, for Gary Groob and the Commissioner of the National Lacrosse League, Brett Frood, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching the NLL Lacrosse Talk, seen live Thursdays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For lacrosse talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out spanglishworld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Until next time.